Members of the council, please rise, put your hats, pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mayor Kangas?
Here.
Councilmember Smith?
Here.
Councilmember Karki? Councilmember Becker?
Here.
Councilmember Howard?
Here.
Councilmember Ilmanen? Councilmember Flowey?
Here.
Number 4, approval of agenda. Motion?
There's a motion to approve the agenda.
Support. As you done?
Yep.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Okay, number 5, public comment. It's 3 minutes each, so, and I just want to remind, a pretty good idea why the crowd is here tonight. We're gonna be having a public hearing right after this, so you can also speak, you know, if you choose to refrain to speak afterwards, maybe public comment or something else, since you only have 3 minutes. But, I just wanna make you aware that those are 2 options there for you. And when you come up to the podium, please state your name and your city of residence, please. Okay, so I'm opening public comment.
I guess I'd be willing to start. Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Jeff Plummer, resident of Negaunee, live very close to the Old Town area and the proposed parcel that's being proposed to be rezoned. I guess I oppose the rezoning of this parcel on a variety of grounds, mostly because it's already in the public domain and it's being highly utilized by both citizens and visitors alike. And I believe taking it out of that public use green space to sell to a private developer to benefit a few is not a good idea. Another thing, if you're familiar, everyone here with this property, Snow Street where it goes in, this is the entrance, a road entrance, and it's really kind of the marquee or the gateway to all of Old Town. And it sets a visual precedence, and a lot of people say, well, it's just 5 acres out of a few hundred. But it's a major 5 acres in terms of the presence of this as a park-like public use area. And I just believe there's better opportunities in the private sector for people to develop, and it's already underway. There's a big project just announced that's gonna happen in a downtown building recently with up to 8 residential units. I do believe the developers are responding to the need for housing. We all agree housing is an issue in many communities. But I would like to see this saved for the whole of the park, and I believe we should be adding to our green space rather than taking away. And this is critical. In my view as a downtown business owner also, I see this as an economic driver of traffic to downtown. And I know people that are moving here just to access this Old Town area. It's becoming huge, and I don't think anyone anticipated how popular it's gonna be when the city first bought it, but it's become enormously popular. And I would just quote the master plan, basically bringing up the idea of how important these recreational spaces are from the master plan. By enhancing and investing in public spaces, these actions have the effect of encouraging private investment in nearby property. So I think keeping this intact will really help the town going forward. And if we do this, we can't undo it, and that's my concern. So I would love to see it left as is. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Plummer. Anything else? I'm trying to figure out my timer on my phone here, so if you hear a... Oh, okay.
I'll be quick, I promise.
We got last comment.
Margaret Twitchell, Negaunee, Michigan. I support rezoning of this area in Old Town. The area in question is 5 acres,
Hello,
of which 3 are
I'm in
buildable.
the meeting
The
right now.
other 392 acres are encumbered as they are caving grounds and cannot be used. Then after the rezoning, the property in question still needs to go to the planning commission to decide what is proper to build on those 3 acres. And I trust that they would make a decision that was favorable for our city. Housing in Negaunee and all of Marquette County is in very short supply. Let's be part of the solution and not part of the selfish hyperbole that is circling. And let's move forward, Negaunee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Carrie Plummer, Negaunee resident, and I agree with everything Jeff had just said. I do want to say that I don't think it's selfish if you find that there's an area, this 5-acre parcel for me, and I know my family, and I know many other people will agree, is a sanctuary. And I think having refuge, it's so close to the town, I think that's one reason why you are targeting this area for development, because it is so close to town. But it's another reason why so many of us enjoy it. It's a highly utilized area, and if it's taken from us, it's forever taken away. And we have no idea of the ramifications for that. There could be a private developer, we don't know the circumstances, of course, of how many housings that would be provided for these residents, but I don't think it's the solution. And I think there's so many other alternatives in the private sector that we don't have to go for the public domain. Again, an area that is already highly utilized and cherished by so many of us. So I just would like you to please consider that, because it's dear to many, many people. And I truly hope that the city council will vote no on rezoning this. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, I am Amanda Ganabati, resident of Negaunee, and I oppose the proposed rezoning of the parcel in question in Old Town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mike Maloney. I'm a resident of Negaunee, 588 Love Street for 37 years. I look straight across at that parcel over there, and I see people every day walking on it. During the summer, we hear families with dogs and families walking the trail. It's a unique area with the old town history and such. And to take that away would take away, it's a pristine area. There's a lot of people in town enjoy going to walk at. And to take that away, I think we put in neighborhoods, that area of quietness in our city is going to be gone. So I oppose the result.
I'm Nate Plummer, Negaunee resident. I oppose the rezoning and would like to see this remain as public space for everyone to enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kevin Kruger. I actually live in the city of Marquette. I have some friends here in Negaunee who I visit sometimes, and we'd like to go hiking in the Old Town area then, and part of the area that we like to hike would be rezoned. Again, I come up to Negaunee to visit friends and all, and sometimes we go out together, certain distances and all, but if we rezone that area and we can't really hike there anymore, because it's taken away from us, I won't be coming up and spending money in local businesses here. I like to support local businesses and all, Campfire Coffee, Midtown Bakery, I really enjoy going to these places, but if I don't, we don't have the opportunity to go hiking there, I probably wouldn't be coming up here as frequently and maybe spending money in your local community here. So, even though I'm not a resident of Negaunee, I enjoy coming up here, but again, if you rezone that area, you might think about going to other places, for hiking. But, thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Anything else in public comment?
Hello. There's a couple of questions here. My name is Floyd Johns. I live at 413 Sear Street, which is the corner of Sear Street and what used to be called Mill Street. My property abuts against the land the city is looking to rezone to the north. I am against this rezoning. I question the ownership of some of the land. In 1992, I applied with the city for a building permit to build a garage. had to get an easement to build closer to Mill Street because I couldn't get an easement to build any closer to the railroad, even though it was abandoned and had a caving ground fence running down the middle of it. Once a railroad, always a railroad, I was told. My tax statement this year still says my property line starts north of the railroad right-of-way. The city is showing this as being city property for the rezoning. Is it? Can it be built on? Secondly, the street boundaries for this property are Sear Street on the east, Snow Street on the south, Mary Street on the west, running south to north partially, and Jennings Street running east and west. The catch here is pursuant to court order in 1981, Jennings Street and possibly a portion of Mary Street were abandoned, along with some other streets in the surrounding area. According to paperwork that I received from the city attorney 3 years ago, the abandonment prevents the city from using city resources to maintain and or improve the streets, including plowing. I question how the city could use city resources to even purchase the abandoned areas. I recently noticed that on the newest maps posted online of the rezoning area, that Mary and Jennings Street have been renamed, calling them Snow Street. Is this a way around the court order? If so, I know 1 or 2 other streets in town that have been abandoned, and the residents would like their street renamed for maintenance and plowing purposes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Caitlin. I live on Cantor Street, and I frequently hike the area that you are talking about rezoning. I completely oppose that. There's many wildflowers and deer that keep their babies there, and I just don't, when you go down that street and don't see homes, it's a relief. I don't wanna see it filled up with houses and people who might not respect the area. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Heidi Johns, I live on Sear Street in Negaunee. It's been brought up that the area, it looks very small there. It's only 5 acres and there's many other acres. But I live a block from Snow Street, the entrance to Old Town. And I'm constantly seeing so many people going in and out and walking and biking on the streets, not just the trails. And, one of my concerns is the amount of traffic that development will cause. I don't know how many houses would be put in there, 20, 30, 40. And if each dwelling has 1 car, possibly 2 or 3, that's just gonna open up tons of traffic there. You know, they'll go through to get to Ishpeming, and it'll no longer be like a recreational area, just a highly trafficked area.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name is William Malmston. I'm a owner of the 2 duplexes on the corner of Snow and Sear Streets, and right across the street from the proposed development, and I'm a resident of Ely Township. I've spoken with all of our duplex residents, and all of them are opposed to the rezoning. The City of Negaunee Master Plan recognizes the importance of maintaining open spaces, section 6, covering natural resources, environment, and energy, states on page 27. Establishing, growing, and maintaining green spaces in this city is beneficial for residents' quality of life, visitors' impressions, and for stewardship of the environment. Under goals on page 53, objective 11.3.4 states, encourage preservation of open and green spaces that maintain a rural character and scenic views that make Negaunee unique. Under land use on page 66 is listed action item 11.2.2, which states, make protection of recreational sites and public spaces a priority for the city. Recently, the city constructed two large parking lots immediately adjacent to the proposed development area. Parking lots are intended to provide much needed parking for Jackson Park and the Old Town Nagani area, but nonetheless, they have already eroded the amount of open space in this area, and this proposed development would further degrade that area. The proposed residential two classification provides a relatively high density of development with a minimum of 80 feet of road frontage and a lot size of less than a quarter of an acre. This relatively high density development would degrade the area that the parking lots are intended to serve. I reject the premise that because the demand for more housing exists from people who are not residents of the city must therefore try to meet the demand, and I believe that the city's obligation should be to meet the wants and desires of the current residents. Therefore, I am opposed to the rezoning plan. Please let this area remain a scenic, natural public space for all to enjoy and consistent with your master plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Woodland. I'm a new Nagani resident. I just bought the old church at 520 Bluff Street. The reason I moved to Nagani is I'm originally from Marquette and spent most of my life in Marquette. And I saw the tearing down of land and the building up of it, of all the stores, the apartments. It totally changed Marquette. Marquette is now like the new Petoskey, Traverse City. There's traffic. When I moved to Nagani, July 31st, it was like going back to Marquette. It was quiet roads, you'd see people in the parks. On Wednesday, they would have the food fairs, I believe it was, and there would always be tourists and stuff downtown. And I would talk to these people, and one couple was actually from Chicago, and they come up all the time and to do the biking and go exploring. And I think it'd be a real shame if we start copying what every other city is doing around here. What we have is what you have, everybody in Nagani has such a unique opportunity to keep that area the way that it is. Once you take it down, so much is gonna change. And I hope that none of you go that route and look back years from now and say, God, what a mistake we made.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Esther Ruppels. I'm a Marquette resident, and I'm a Itchburg business owner. And I oppose the questioned parcel that you have right here because last time I checked, the Upper Peninsula has fought to keep the corporations out of the area, and I think that by putting all these houses in this area, it's just gonna keep letting them in, and the corporations are gonna win at the end of the day. And I moved here 10 years ago from Seattle, Washington, so I fell in love with the Yooper culture, and I found God in this area. So I definitely oppose this, and I think that you should leave it the way it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else, public comment?
Hello, my name is David Beimel. I've been living here in Nagani for about 10 years, and we've been fortunate enough to put together some rentals. And as we market our rentals, we tell our prospective future renters that we live near Old Nagani. And there's a lot of biking, and there's cross-country trails. And many of the people that come in, I'm finding they are utilizing that space. And I think it is drawing people in. And my concern is that Nagani is fortunate to have a diamond in the rough, literally. And I'm hoping that you look at it as that gem that will just shine 30 years out, 40 years out. Because if you start down the road of picking parts of it and saying, well, we can exclude that from, and just make it private, that will then start other people looking at this. And once it starts getting picked away, it won't be the same in 15 and 20 years, 30 years, when many of us won't be here. So I'm hoping that you'll make a decision for the future of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Belle Vinyl, and, I'm a resident here, we live on Peck Street. We lived on Lombard for a while, which is right where this is going, and, I'm a homeschool mother. And a huge part of my curriculum is having my kids go outside, especially in the summer. We started off a few years ago, quite a few years ago, with having a special nature spot. And that nature spot suddenly had a frisbee golf set in there, which we love. But we had to move our nature spot, which we had been building up. We have flowers there. Now the flowers are being picked. I'm glad to have that frisbee golf in our city. But if it were a house, that might really change things. If it were an apartment complex, our homeschooling would now be much, much different. And having less access to nature it's not healthy for children's brains. My curriculum is based on reading books and going outside. Those are the two main things, and if we're taking away the nature aspect of it, what are we saying for the education of our children? Both the homeschoolers and the public school children alike. When we're out there, quite often we see the public school kids during school going out and doing their own nature walks as well. And I just think there's a lot more to it than just bringing in more revenue for our city. I think there are other ways that we can look for that solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Public comment?
Somebody commented.
Stephanie Lovar, I'm a resident of Nagani, citizen for a long time. I live on Croy Street, across the highway. Oh boy, the amount of time I've spent in the woods in Nagani is immeasurable. Growing up on County Road, that area behind County Road was clear cut about 20 years ago, wiping out the trail systems back there, which Ramba has rebuilt, which is a beautiful thing. But that was my first time being devastated as a. This is a very emotional thing for me. I'm pretty passionate about the outdoors, those of you who know me, so. But the disappointment for losing that space initially was very overwhelming. I heard someone else say they found God, right? I grew up a Christian, but there's a different connection that you find in the woods. So that space eliminated. I jumped over Michigan Street, found Old Nagani. Was very pleased when it started to become opened back up to the citizens, was deemed at least safe enough for the recreational uses that we now, many hundreds, thousands of people use today. I utilize the parking lot at the end of Snow Street to access the trails. And in that usage, every time someone comes in, they park their truck, their SUV, their Subaru, they hop out with their fat tire bike, they enter the trails in the proposed rezoning area. Yes, some people might say it's a very small space, but I know someone else had mentioned it is like the gateway to Old Nagani. Page 3 of the master plan lists the importance of the history of Nagani, right? So if, page 3, okay, I mean, the history that's in that space, it's beautiful. The sidewalk location that's there, we go sledding down one of the old staircases right there. You start to introduce residential in there, you eliminate the public. Maybe the public could still access it, but the comfort level of being in that space. Not to mention, someone else mentioned the traffic increase.
people walk their dogs, they go running, they bike. I see so many little kids running around in the streets. It's literally a playground for our community. Eliminating any portion of it, I think, as someone else mentioned, would be detrimental to what it seems to be the master plan that the city has put in place, introducing and continuing to build upon the recreational spaces that we have available for our residents, which is the reason why I still continue to want to live in this town and this community. So I oppose it vehemently. Please don't take it away. It'd be a very sad day. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, somebody else's comments.
Hi, my name's Christine Beaumont. I kind of follow my friend and show support. My husband and I bought a house on Clark Street, 307 West Clark Street. In 2016, I moved here from Chicago, and it was the best decision we've ever made in our lives. This town is everything to me. I feel like, saved me. So, and part of it is that Old Town area. When I would walk outside of my house with my dogs, I just walk right in there. And it's just, it always took me away. When she's talking about going down those, sliding down the hills, we literally just go down on our butts. Like, that place, that whole area is just so special to me. And I know it sounds like a lot of people that have already spoken up. And I'm proud of everyone that did. And who didn't, that's fine too. But I'm glad you're here showing your support, because this is important to all of us. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else over there in the corner?
Somebody else comments.
Somebody come in.
Okay, with that,
There's one
I'm.
person. Somebody coming.
One more, okay.
Speak.
So you see your own corners.
No.
Oh.
We're good? Okay. Okay, with that, I'm closing public comment. Thank you for all your input. It's valuable to hear, and it's, thanks again. So with that, we're going with agenda number 6.1 rezoning, ordinance amendment number 156 second reading. And
Rezone a parcel within Old Town from a public area district to a multifamily residential district, R2. This proposed ordinance amendment has been on our website and in the city library for citizens to review and has also been approved by the Planning Commission. The amendment will be to the newly created Chapter 156 following the recent codification, and a zoning map is attached here too for reference. Hold a public hearing.
okay, what we're gonna do here is I'm gonna open public hearing, and any question, or any comments or questions from the public, feel free, and like we just got done doing. But then upon doing that, city manager and, Mr. Nelson, they're gonna give a presentation that's for the council, okay? And probably in their presentation, we'll probably have some of the concerns for which we just heard, okay? And once the presentation is done, it comes before us, and then, we go from there, okay? So I just want, that's kinda how we'll run it, so with that, I'm opening the public hearing. Any comments or?
Hello, Gary Nelson, I live on 216 Shoreline Drive, in Negaunee. And I could appreciate the fact that you got some great recreational opportunities here, within the city. No ifs, ands, about it, those recreational opportunities, add value to the community. We have Alpha, Teal Lake, the property to the north of Teal Lake, I believe, is all part of public property with trails and everything up there as well. So I'm not opposed to having recreational opportunities, because it does bring people into your area as well. But we also need economic development. I'm probably Nate's biggest pain in the butt complaining about taxes all the time. And obviously my taxes in Teal Lake Estates are higher than normal on average. So when you get these opportunities for some economic development to raise income, I'm always looking forward to some economic opportunities. Because obviously, the costs to run the city keep going higher, they're not gonna keep going lower. Taxes keep going higher, and it's not always the city, there's other entities that have filed millages and stuff that have added to our tax bill on it. But in addition, housing brings more people into the community too, that live in your community. And with, obviously, sometimes they'll have more kids, which will support your schools as well, in the school system. So let's, from my perspective, take a quick look at, what's being proposed. I'm of the opinion, I could be wrong, it's like 1.5% of the total area, ballpark. You still have the other 99% I highly doubt that they're gonna remove any of the trails, hiking trails, because a lot of it's already paved and everything anyway, so those opportunities are still gonna potentially be there. So, and it's my understanding that the proposed would potentially generate eight home sites, is probably what we're talking about, on average. So, I ran a few numbers here, being in the banking and finance field, I'm a numbers guy, I guess, kind of thing, so, if there's 8 home sites potentially there, the average home today is about 1,800 square feet. At a cost of $350 per square foot to build a new home, you're talking $630,000 of cost to build a new home. And I'm thinking that's probably fairly average, could be higher than that, could be potentially less than that. Who's on the tax rolls for half of that, 315 times the current millage rate of 42, that's $13,230 per home in that general area. Okay, you take that times 8 potential homes, you're talking $105,000 of revenue to the city potentially, is what it's gonna do. So, from those perspectives, if you look at, generating revenue, you need economic development. Yes, you need recreation, but you also need economic development to keep your city function, because again, the costs are gonna keep going higher. So it can bring people in, but we need to find that happy medium between economic development and recreational opportunities, to put it into that. So, we need to find lots of opportunities that will do both, you know what I mean? And I think in this case, you can have both. You can have, again, it's only 1.5% of the total area. But you're able to produce $100,000 of potential tax revenue in that area. So, and I think from my perspective, and I could be wrong, maybe you'll explain it in your presentation later, most of the recreational opportunities are still gonna be there in that area. I suspect the trails will still be there, a lot of things, the sledding stuff, that's probably all still gonna be there here. So, but you need to look for those kind of opportunities as well, to help grow your city with the tax base and tax revenue as well, so, thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Is it just open again, we get a chance to go again? Well, often here on proposals for economic development, we need to have more tax base, but, when you get, more development, you get more expenses, and we don't necessarily see that, larger cities have lower taxes. In fact, it seems like the opposite, that we have lower taxes in smaller cities, so I'm not sure that holds direct. And the other point that I wanted to make was that this is not necessary, the zoning, residential two that's proposed, but not limited to, high-end, single-family homes. It can be, multifamily homes that might be built there, and in Ishpeming, we've seen most of the time when there's proposals for large apartment buildings, it comes with a request for exemption from property taxes, and so most of our big apartment buildings in Ishpeming aren't paying, are very much reduced property taxes. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. You're next, Don.
I'd like to speak to the taxes and revenue for the city. So what what I saw a couple doors down from me on County Road is that you all sold 3 parcels of land for $7,500. And spent taxpayer money, hundreds of thousands of dollars to put in a new sewer line because of that. That we're gonna be paying taxes on as residents for the next 10-15 years. We didn't see any, you know, revenue from that. That's all money that we're spending that you guys sold to Snap Builders for who knows why you sold it for only $7,500. The lots there are worth way more than that. For them to make, you know, probably $750,000 on in the end. And then we had to pay for the sewer to be run through my backyard. You know, ripped up my garden that I've been growing with heirloom grapes for 10 years now that I'll never see again. And, you know, I really don't appreciate, you know, all this government overreach on land that we utilize, that you guys are trying to sneak under the radar. You know, none of us would have known about this if it weren't for a few people that live close to that area that let us know. I never got a letter. I had to hear it from friends. You know, our citizens should be included in these decisions that not only affect us as residents that utilize this area, but people all over the community into other states come and use this area. And I see the pattern that's going here. You're selling off all this parkland and building houses. You know, what's next after you sell this 5-acre parcel? Where are we going here? I don't want this to turn into Marquette, otherwise I'd live in Marquette.
Yes.
Thank you. Don?
Good evening, Don Schnella, 213 Shoreline Drive. A lot of opposition against developing Old Town. And I can understand that, but I also understand what the council is going through here, the city manager and the planning, because if we all remember back in 2003 when the city purchased this property, I think it was 2005, they hired UP Engineering to do this land reuse plan. And in that development portion of that plan, they allocated I think it was over 100 acres to be residential. And they based that on mining activity. Some areas were catastrophic where they could cave at any time, they fenced that area off. Some areas were slumpage, they made it recreational. And then I forgot what the total acreage is, but this 3 acres that you're trying to develop is part of the initial plan to make this residential. In regards to the Rambo Trail, I'm a licensed real estate agent too, I'm sure a lot of people know that, but I represent Porter Limited, and they own 40 acres to the northwest. And currently, Ramba has got permission to use that trail and maintain it. And it's probably, a lot of people think it's the city's property, because there's also foundations and homes on that Old Town. I think 10 acres of that is actually considered Old Town area. They've given permission for the public or Ramba to use it, maintain it, and they're trying to work with the city right now to trade that property for a parcel that the city of Negaunee owns outside of town. So they would gain 40 more acres if this came to fruition. So they'd lose 3 and pick up 40. And I thought that would be a fair change. The whole deal with Mr. Nelson's talking about the taxes, the millage rate is high in Negaunee. And if the city could get some more monies in the coffers and make this thing developer come in, I don't know who you get to develop, but they can come in and do all the expense on themselves and bring tax dollars in, and you can
get the tax millage down, get the trade deal going, you're gonna end up in positive on the acreage, and you still have money coming in. That's pretty much all I have to say. If anybody wanted to see that plan reuse, I printed it out, read through it. And the property that Porter does own to the northwest is zone R2, which is the same as what the city's gonna do. At any given time, Porter could develop that into houses or storage buildings. I think that fits right into the zoning. So, there's a lot of things that people, I don't think, realize.
Would you clarify how many acres are involved? I couldn't see it written down anywhere. How many acres are to be rezoned?
That question will be answered when I give the presentation,
Okay.
in more details, okay?
If you don't mind, I'll say one more thing, Jeff Plummer. The land, that land, that Don is talking about is privately owned, so we're talking kind of apples and oranges. This is publicly owned land that our taxpaying money bought. And I think the numbers game is a difficult one, because you can add up potential taxes, and these are all hypotheticals. We don't know what's gonna end up there if it gets rezoned, so that's all hypothetical. And as other people said, we don't know the cost. Yet that's old infrastructure there. The city might be back on the hook for many more hundreds of thousands of dollars if they have to improve infrastructure, sewer and water for a large development. So that's an unknown cost to the citizens. And I always look at, I was on the DDA when the city purchased this land. And most people on the city council and even in the DDA felt it was just, it took some time, but we needed to purchase it because it was there. And how many towns have an opportunity to buy this kind of land, now vacant land right adjacent to their downtown? But really, the plans back then were very amorphous, because no one really had an idea what it was gonna become. And then when the Iron Ore Heritage Trail got put through there, and the public responded to all that, and the trail building started. It occurred organically over many decades. So almost two decades later, we have what's a de facto park. I know it's not formalized as that, but Old Town is a historic, cultural, recreational jewel. And I don't like the idea of chipping away at it, and it adds value to all the homes in the community. You hear of people buying homes just to get close to those trails. That's something that's very hard to calculate, is what is the tax valuation going up based on people wanting to live here? Home prices have gone up a lot, and then therefore the taxes are going up. Our taxes are already, we're collecting more taxes because, in part, to areas like this that are drawing people. So I think leaving it this way is the bigger value economically. It's really hard to prove that in numbers. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Dawn Evans, I am a city resident here in Negaunee. I just want to talk a minute for the fact that I agree that the city should look at affordable housing. I do believe that is a necessary need here in the town. However, I feel that using Old Town as the plot and the land for this, maybe not in the best interest. It is a massive attraction for visitors from all over. Everybody's talking about that already. I don't have to reiterate that part. And I think that perhaps it's going to come up in your presentation that we'll have a better understanding of what this is going to look like. Right now, we're looking at this map with this ginormous 5-acre swath just brushed across the entire thing. And I'm wondering if we had a better idea of what those plots and what the land and what the residential zoning might look like, would be maybe clarify a few things for those of us who are concerned about what's going to happen to this piece of property. Affordable housing, like I mentioned, is important, but I also want to call attention to an uncompleted project at the end of Sunset and Woodland Drive. Two pieces of property and two roads that were connected to Moss Street, where I have a little bit of personal interest in this, as my mom is a resident on Sunset, as is my grandfather. And that piece of property has been untouched for almost 2 summers with 2 lots sold. And it was told to them that it was going to be affordable residential housing as well. And I don't feel as though that's necessarily the case. So I would like you to just consider maybe getting that project completed before we decide to take this over and turn it into residential as well. Thank you.
I just wanted to mention talking housing shortage. Housing shortage and affordable housing are two different things. And when the land was sold, the public domain of the old Jackson Park area, to a developer, that, from my understanding, is not considered affordable housing. It's housing, but it's not affordable housing. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else comment? Okay, with that, I'll close this part of the public hearing, that's what I meant to say. So, Mr. Heffrey, you want to do the presentation, feel free.
Sure, Mr. Mayor.
And remember, the presentation is for the council, but I'm sure it'll touch a lot of the questions which you may have asked.
Mr. Mayor and Council, so tonight I'm going to give a presentation on why we're here, answer a bunch of different questions. For the public's benefit, I'll try to answer some of the questions that were raised during the public comment and also during the public hearing. One thing I want to preference is that this will not be a back and forth between me and anybody in the audience, so I will not be able to answer any of your questions, because that's not what this is for. I can only answer questions to the council. If someone does have a question after the meeting, you're more than welcome to wait outside, and I'll be glad to answer your question out there. So the first thing I will mention is that I personally do not have a horse in this race. My job is to promote the community and develop the community. I also have my planning and zoning administrator, Dave Nelson, here, that's going to help explain some of the process should this property become rezoned and what that means. So the first thing I'm going to preface here is this yellow piece of property is the 5 acres. Okay, so it is correct that Sears Street does go through here, right? And then Snow Street's right over here, right in this area. The streets were not renamed, that's a Google thing, so they can put whatever they want on it. And they have no official names anyways, because they've all been lifted out of the property. They are no longer public streets, but they are owned by the public because they're on publicly owned land. Okay, so one thing here I'm going to start with is I'm going to read the question and answer fact sheet that we did put on the internet for folks to help get a better idea of what's happening here. So what property is being considered for rezone? I just showed that on the map. What is the land zoned for presently? The land currently is zoned public area or public access. According to Negauni's Code of Ordinance, public districts afford access to the city, public or quasi-public uses designed to serve the entire community or specific section of it, and allow for flexibility to address specific public land use proposals that are in the best interest of the public, health, safety, and welfare of the citizens and the residents. So that's what it's zoned for right now. If it gets rezoned to R2, we'll be able to build homes on that. So to what zoning district will this be done? Rezone to, that's gonna be R2. And the zoning ordinance says, multifamily residential districts are intended for the establishment and preservation of residential areas with single and multifamily dwellings and capable or compatible uses. So if rezoned R2, what will happen to the property? So this means that the property can be used to support new housing developments consistent with the uses allowed by the zoning ordinance. So that doesn't mean if the council decides tonight, if this were to be rezoned R2, that immediately houses are to be built there, that's obvious. But we will go through a process, and I'll let Mr. Nelson explain that here in just a second, where the public will be able to come out and help us determine what will be built on that property. So one thing we, as staff, we would not recommend to the council for building high rises. So that's something that wouldn't be what we'd be looking for. We additionally would be looking for properties that necessarily provide tax abatements. Now, one thing that folks have to realize when someone buys a property, unless the city specifically bans it is they have access to funds and also legal mechanisms like brownfields to develop properties. And that's to make the project affordable, because they have to make money off of it. Developers are not gonna develop anything and not make money off of it. That's just the way, the world works. So they could access certain things unless we specifically, say they could not. So the point being is we will have specific meetings with the public, if rezoned, to figure out what could be put on this property. So Mr. Nelson, can you please explain that process just a little bit more and what that means?
So part of that process, I guess I'm supposed to be addressing you. So part of that process is part of the MEDC's RRC certification that we just got recently. So with that, we can access pre-development funding. And so what that would entail is the MEDC would bring their team of development architects and engineers to plan out what the development would be there. But part of that process would be multiple public input meetings and input with staff and the community multiple times, bringing it to the planning commission, kind of back, revising back and forth. It'd be a long drawn out process. If this property were even to be rezoned tonight, this process wouldn't start till October, because that's when we can access those funds, because they work on a fiscal year. So once that would start, we'd start in 2025, start doing some brainstorming, and I would encourage all of you to attend those meetings if that does occur, and all of you, because all of you are here because you enjoy that property as well. And if we can get all that input into what that proposed development would be, that's what we're looking to see. That's why we did the whole MEDC redevelopment ready communities. That's why we are certified, because we want to involve the public at every step of the process. Hence why we, have to notice everything out. But this will be a more just contained project where all the community members can kind of determine what they want to see here. I know Mr. Nelson mentioned 8 home sites, but is that what the community would want to see there if we are developing it for housing? Personally, my thought would be to have something to where seniors could downsize, and that would free up some housing stock here in Negaunee, and we could get units in there where people are, around the empty nesters, retirement age, maybe want to downsize, they could move there. They're close to downtown, they're close to the senior center. Seniors are awesomely active now. So they'd be on the trail system, both the Ramba and the Iron Ore Hair Trail, and the snowshoeing, everything. But yeah, so the community would be ultimately the ones deciding what gets developed in that location if it gets rezoned.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. So why this piece of property? That's a question that got brought up a couple times. We do have that in our question and answer thing here. So it's not that one day that I decided that this property was suited for housing, or Mr. Nelson or the planning commission or something like that. It was identified in 2006. I believe one of our speakers mentioned that there was a reuse study that was done on the property in question, and there was large swaths of property that were ideal for housing and commercial property, so on and so forth. But one of the things that our staff has realized in the last year or two was that's not very feasible. One, because all the different activities with the property itself, trails being built on it, being used for recreational, different recreational needs that we have out there, and all that type of stuff. The other thing is this property has a specific encumbrance on it, meaning that it cannot be developed for housing, commercial, or other types of uses besides recreation for a minimum of 30 years. And one of the things that we do here at the City of Negaunee to reduce the burden on taxpayers is we go for recreation grants all the time. And this is our park. This is our central park that we're using to help augment the downtown, also bring in different residents, and bring in people such as tourists. And so one of the things we're going to be doing is we're going to continue to invest in this park using those grants. And every time we get one of those grants, we have to encumber that entire white space. So every single time we do that, and for the council's benefit, the entire white space. that means it can't be touched for another 30 years going forward. So that protects that property. One thing that we are looking at, a newly established Trails Committee that's looking at trying to enhance the trails, sustain the trails, bring in more people to use the trails, and build new trails within this area, this white area that I'm talking about here. There's talk under our committee that we may look at recommending at the end of the day that the council takes official action and makes this into a recreation area, which will add an additional layer of protection to it. Why am I telling you all this? Well, it's because we are not going to erode or take any other property in this gray area out of that space, only the yellow space. That's the only area that we find suitable for housing. So why do we find it suitable for housing? Because it's close to utilities. It is the only piece of property that really doesn't have any type of caving activity involved with it. And it's close to our downtown. So those are some benefits that we have. A question got brought up, who would pay for the utilities? Well, the developer bores the costs of utilities. That's what's in our ordinance, unless we have a development agreement that states otherwise. The development that's down by Sunset, that's a private property. That property's always been private. The city of Negaunee does not own that property, and we have not owned that property. So we have no control over the cost of it. We have no control over the lots that are sold there. We only have our agreement, which is a brownfield development agreement, where they take on the risk of building the infrastructure on that property. And what happens is, as they pay taxes, they get paid back for putting that risk in there. They're working on developing that still. It's not complete, I agree with that. But there's nothing the city of Negaunee can do about that property itself. There was also another question brought up about utilities that were put in down County Road for the Ben Snap project. We did not put in new utilities. We replaced the utilities that were there. The sewer system that was there was deficient, including the ones behind the properties and through the right-of-way that we went through, and they needed to be replaced. Unfortunately, the sewer systems and the water systems in Negaunee have not been touched for a long time, and since I've been here, we've been doing a lot of work to fix those up. We have a lot of water leaking, which wastes tax dollars. We also have a lot of what they call infiltration in the sewer system. So we'll send up millions of gallons of water up to Ishpeming every year to be treated that come right from the ground. And specifically in that space right on County Road, there's a creek that runs through there that was sucking up all kinds of water going up in that direction. So the city paid to fix the sewer line that was already there. We did not pay to have Mr. Snap's sewer system installed for him, nor his water line. He put laterals in under County Road. So just wanted to dispel a couple of those myths from that aspect there. So how will the community benefit from this? So we get more housing stock. We expand our tax base. In addition to that, as one had mentioned, we do have higher taxes in the county. And I believe we have the second highest. Ishpeming has the second, or has the highest, and then it goes down from there. By getting more homes and more people living here, we share that tax burden, and potentially, and Mr. Plummer is correct, as more homes are sold that are already here, they uncap, we get more tax revenue, but not enough. And we need more money to keep the city operational. And we do that by expanding our ability by taxing new properties that come in, either commercial or housing. In that case, if that happens, we have the ability down the road maybe of decreasing taxes by getting rid of certain millages, because we may not need those millages anymore because we have enough tax revenue coming in from residents. I mean, that might be a possibility, but we'll have to see down the road. Okay, so here's another question here. If rezoned from public property, will the public and city have any say in what can be built there? So Mr. Nelson already said yes. We're gonna be having all this public input information, but it also has to go through the planning commission. Somebody just can't build that. So once the public helps give that feedback, and it goes through planning commission, a recommendation will be made with a development agreement. So we're gonna say to a person, if this gets rezoned, whoever the successful bidder is, that you have to build based on this agreement here. And you can't go outside of that agreement at all, because that's what the people of Negaunee have said, that's what the planning commission has said. So that's one benefit that we're gonna have, in our favor, to make sure that we have the type of development occurring on that property that the public wants. So that's another benefit we have. So has the city ever rezoned any other city-owned property for housing? Yes. We zoned approximately 5 acres of property. We broke it up into 4 lots. One we sold to the school district for $1. It was the tennis courts. And I think everybody has driven through there, seen they've redone the tennis courts, they put new fencing up this year. And that's a benefit not just to the school district, but to all the community members here that can use it when nobody else is using it, especially for school activities. There also is a revisionary clause in that, so if the school ever decides they do not wanna take care of that property and keep it as a tennis court or whatever it is, that property will revert back to this ownership of the city. The other 3 lots, yes, we sold for $7,500, which for a lot of people might be shocking. Well, the issue here is we're trying to create affordable housing. So how do we do that? We decrease the amount of money it costs to build utilities, so we put that proximity to utilities, just like this property is. In addition to that, where Mr. Snap's properties are on County Road. The cost of land, so we see the Sunset development taking time to take root. Those lots are going for $50,000 to $60,000 a lot, and they're small lots, so that's gonna be a little bit prohibitive for maybe some developers to do that. So those are some of the things we have to look at, that developers have, the burden to bear, and that is their burden to bear, but if we want housing, and housing that's gonna be affordable and bring people into our community, we have to find ways to reduce that cost to them for real development to come here, if we want that development to come here, so. Okay, so has the city conducted a housing study? So an informal survey was taken of seniors here at the senior center. We had 60 respondents to that. Saying they want housing, and they would downsize from the housing they have now if they had an opportunity, specifically what Mr. Nelson was talking about. I'm not saying that's what's gonna happen there, but that's what could happen if the public wants that to happen. We can get seniors that don't want to leave Negaunee, but are forced to go all the way down to Marquette and live there, and they have to leave their community they lived all their life, grew up, raised their family, all that. So that's one of the things that we have talked to seniors here. And we've done that study at least twice. And then we also have another study that's being conducted as a county-wide study with different municipalities that will be forthcoming here in a couple months, I believe. And it indicates that Negaunee is a prime location for housing to happen. Obviously, Marquette has kind of priced itself out. We can't take all the housing, that's not possible, that's not gonna happen. But we're primed to at least have maybe potentially 100 new homes in the area, or units potentially. It doesn't have to be just homes, it could be an apartment building somewhere on another piece of property, like Mr. Argold's planning on doing downtown. And it could be other properties that are private, like on Sunset. And we also have public properties, like we sold to Mr. Snap and potentially this property here. All right, are there any written reports or other documents supporting the proposed rezone? Yes, there is, and there are people who have said many things about the master plan. The master plan does say to preserve open spaces and green spaces for public use, and there's historic aspects and all that. But it also does say that we need to look at opportunities to create housing for our community. We also have to look at different properties that are in the city's hands that possibly could be rezoned or developed for housing. So that's one of the things that the master plan says as well. So the master plan is kind of our guiding document that tells us what direction we should be going, and we try to balance that out across the many interests within our community. So that's what we're doing here tonight. Will other lands of Old Town be considered for housing development or rezoned? And I already mentioned, no, we wouldn't. One thing I might mention here is here are the 2 properties in question that Mr. Chanel was talking about, and for the council's benefit. Right up here as well, this area. Those are those 2 20-acre properties where roundup trails are actually on currently right now. The public are using through agreement on private property. if we do have a successful land swap or some other deal to get those properties, then the next step for us would be to rezone that property as public access. And it would stay within that park, as well. What happened to the original homes on the property? Well, the city didn't have anything to do with this. This had to do with, mineral rights that were owned by Cliffs. Cliffs said that something was wrong with the property, and I'm not gonna get into that debate of what it was and what it wasn't. It is, out there for whatever people wanna think. But, there were homes on this property. Everybody knows that. And, they were removed. The main issue or the official concern was caving grounds. And all this property was considered caving grounds, as a lot of people know, and it was cut off. People weren't able to access that legally. But now we bought this property and, we have access to it. And now we have to decide what to do with it. So, one of the other things too, I'll point out, other documents is the land review study says that there could be housing here, okay? And one thing I wanna point out from that, cost of buying this property, all this in the white and in the yellow, including some other acreages not here right now, and to answer your question, this is 320 acres, there's a misprint on this one, we thought it was 220. We read that wrong when we put that out there, but 320 acres, but altogether the city bought about 900 acres and that cost $586,735. That's the investment the city took out of the general fund to purchase all these different properties, not just this one here, for reinvestment, for redevelopment. That's what the land use study said. And this document right here is official press release by the city of Negaunee that states that very reasoning why they bought that property. Now, you can say redevelopment, that's a wide term, right? So when you connect this to the land reuse study, it shows that they were looking at more than just recreation. In fact, I don't know if they were really looking at a lot of recreation. But for the circumstances at hand, years go by. This happened in 2006, right? So as Mr. Plummer said, decades go by, it just kind of fell into recreation. So here we are. We got this beautiful asset. We have the Iron Ore Heritage Trail. It goes through here. It's over this area. And we got our pavilion over here. We got parking spaces over here. Things of that nature. So that's all the things we got going on here, and I know that somebody said something about some trees getting cut over here. I think that was probably due to something with the sewer system that was put throughout there, so. Okay, moving on. Were the Old Town properties originally meant for recreational use? I mentioned that already. What happens to the Ramba Trail? Is the Iron Ore Heritage Trail gonna be affected? The Iron Ore Heritage Trail is not gonna be affected whatsoever. None of the old structures, stairs, walls, any of that stuff is gonna be affected either. In fact, in this trail, and Mr. Mayor, I'm gonna ask your permission here on something. On this property, there is only 150 foot of Ramba Trail that's actually on here. On this yellow piece of property, 150 feet. There are 77 miles of Ramba trails in the city of Negaunee. And I'm not gonna calculate it out, but that's 5,200 something by whatever. But anyhow, 150 feet. And from my understanding, and Mr. Mayor, I'm gonna indulge you to let the Ramba folks get up to offer evidence to the board, what they intend on doing with this trail, whether this property is rezoned or not rezoned. Are you giving me permission to do that?
Yes. Nate was right. There's probably.
Your name, please.
Oh, excuse me. Danny Hill. I'm the executive director at Ramba.
Thank you, Dan.
Yep. And Nate was correct. There's about a 150-foot trail there that was going to be removed anyway because we're crossing a parking lot going down a road. So I got the city's permission to reroute the trail through the patch of woods that you see there now that comes down right.
Just to the south of it.
Comes down here, there's a stairway right there. Yep. There's a stairway that comes down right here, and this new trail would come in right in this area right here. It'll alleviate traffic problems. It'll make my life much better grooming the trails because the city keeps it plowed well, and I gotta cut my way through every time they plow. And Nate was also right, we have 75, 70, or maybe more miles of signed and marked trails between Ishpeming and Negaunee. We have no problem with this piece of property being rezoned. It doesn't affect our trails at all, for any reason that I can see. I know we just had our trail counters, and for the year of 2023, we had 29,966 people using the trails. So that's a big number of people. A lot of them are from out of town. But I can see Negaunee's problem. The tax base got to be raised. I was a resident of Negaunee I was born and raised here, so I have no problem with it at all, and I think that's the feeling of most of the Ramba members.
One question was asked if the city actually owns the land in question. Certainly. Certainly. We wouldn't even be here talking about it if we didn't own property. So, there answers that question. Next, I'm going to have Mr. Nelson talk about prior land uses in the city of Negaunee. Negaunee has rezoned many times, and lots of property was mined. It was all mining property one time. We're a mining town, right? So I'm having to talk about that, and this is in relation to folks saying that there's lots of other property out there that's privately owned that can just be simply used for housing. And we want to kind of give you some information. It certainly could be used for housing, but Mr. Nelson will explain why that may be difficult.
Okay, so the property we've been discussing ad nauseum is this little one right here. It was always residential use. It was always residential, even though it was zone mining. It was always residential. The issue that is developing land in Negaunee, on top of it being hilly, rocky, wetlands, and a majority of the area. So all this is we can't touch. It's deeded completely as nature, so north of Teal Lake never gets touched. The same will be with Old Town, other than that small parcel, which was also identified in the master plan's future land use map. When we did get the grant for the playground, that's how the encumbrance happened in the white shaded area on the other side. But let's get to.
Can you lift that up? Maybe
Yeah, so let's get to a little bit farther. Sorry, camera people. So everyone's mentioning other lands that could be developed. So all this yellow land, that's all Cliff's property. They own it. It's private. It's theirs. It's mining. You have pit down here. So this is for the most part undevelopable. You can develop anywhere, but you would spend millions, if not more, just trying to develop 40 acres of any of this land. So the city owns some of these lands over here, kind of in the Tracy Mine vicinity. We have explored possibly doing something over here, but what we run into, it's similar to like when we were doing the campground. So whenever you're going to do any land development at any of the areas in Negaunee, since it was previously mining, so your environmental site assessment 1 is going to come back hot. So what that means is that you'd have to do further coring, drilling, sampling. And part of the land swap with the city of Negaunee and Cleveland Cliffs is that it was deeded in that any environmental contamination that is located on those sites is no longer their problem. It is the city of Negauni's problem. So any of that land, which they would trigger hot because this is all old mining land. And some of these areas haven't even been looked at for subsistence. There's been these are private properties, these have been explored for subsistence. The only area you could even build on these parcels is the very fringe because of the possible ground collapse. And that's actually where the Negauni mine collapse happened, if you're familiar with that. That was quite catastrophic. Once you get out into this area over here, we're talking about big rolling hills, lots of rock outcroppings, but you're also nowhere near infrastructure at that point. City infrastructure is gonna stop right around here, right down to here. Once you get over here, that's all well and septic, but these are also all privately owned as well. The city owns another parcel kind of over here off of Helmsdorfer. If you ever go walk out there, you can see the elevation change, right? It just drops right down into wetland. And it's basically undevelopable. The cemetery's up here. You're not building houses on the cemetery. All this land over here is basically inaccessible. Same type of situation with the Carp River, and all of this is also floodplain from the Carp. So this is all eliminated as well. So we are really very limited with what we can actually develop land-wise without incurring massive costs possibly for remediation and then installing infrastructure. All of these other properties would have millions of dollars of just startup costs, and many developers would just walk away. No one's gonna wanna invest that type of money. It's just not gonna happen. Even up here, over off of Cambria, right behind Cambria, that's also mining as well. So that would also have to be taken care of. And that's actually private property, that's not city property. So that would have to be, explored by that private entity. So we are really quite limited. And truthfully, I have been trying to push for money for hard rock mine remediation. It's just really not available. If you were a coal community, tons of money. So I've been working with the Department of the Interior and various other entities, Eagle, the OSMRE, which actually does coal stuff. And I've been trying to get, because they actually had in the infrastructure bill in 2000, they had $3 billion earmarked for hard rock mine remediation, which is amazing, but the federal government works very slow. So right now, there's still in discussions for bills to be passed possibly this coming year or the next, because they work so slow, to where there could be some money available for that hard rock mine remediation. But that, we're talking 5 years down the line before any of that money would become available to any community to actually look and explore these areas to make sure they're safe. Because God forbid we put a housing development on a contaminated piece of property, or a piece of property that could have slumpage in the future to where somebody builds a house and all of a sudden in 5 years, foundation cracks in half. So we have to be real careful in Negauni where we actually identify property for development. Yeah. And,
Thank you, Mr. Nelson.
And that's all my name. Sorry, I was gonna turn that way. But.
And I just want to reiterate as what Mr. Nelson was talking about.
$20 for holding
That's
that.
what makes it difficult for us to even recommend doing anything in the gray area. One, the infrastructure would be an astronomical cost to the public or developer. Yes, there's infrastructure back there still, but it's not usable. And you can't do a grid pattern back here, like most traditional communities do for neighborhoods, where you get your biggest bang for the buck for not only development, but for infrastructure costs. And then the whole aspect about the contamination. So this kind of erodes away from the slippery slope effect, where we take 5 acres of property and then what's next on this property. From my perspective, with the 30-year connection on this, of the protection, there is no slippery slope here. So. Mr. Mayor, I got 2 documents here that I'm just gonna admit to the public record. One is for, and one is against. And the public is welcome to collect those if they'd like through a FOIA request. And then,
I handed them all to
you
you.
got it? Okay, very good. And then the last thing I'm going to address, Mr. Mayor, before I entertain questions from the council, is we have a couple comments from, Facebook that's out in the public, that we just wanna answer some of those questions in case it, helps with your decision-making and also for the audience itself. So the question is there any infrastructure support, the rezone area, water, sewer, electric, so on and so forth? Yes, this property was identified due to its, being an ideal location due to proximity to adequate public services. In addition to that, our next phase 1 water and sewer project will be doing upgrades in this old section of town, not Old Town, the old section of town, kind of like where your guys' property is over there, Bluff Street, so on and so forth. So there may be opportunities to partner with a developer in that circumstance. Here's a question, if you don't mind, sir. Let's see. You should also ask who's paying for the water lines and sewer lines. So the possible development would be privately funded. The developer would also be able to access MDC funding, brownfield funding, like I mentioned, or other such funding mechanisms available to qualifying developer. So the developer is on the hook for putting in the infrastructure. Here's a kind of a tongue-in-cheek, I suppose, gotta come up with some, money to pay the overpriced salaries. So the property in question will be auctioned off with an attached development agreement if it's rezoned. The city is financially sound. It would not utilize the property to sale to provide operating revenues. This is to provide housing to address the nationwide housing need. In addition to that, this process takes a very, very long time. And if this gets rezoned, the process Mr. Nelson talked about, where the public would be involved, the MEDC, that wouldn't even begin until October of this year. So that's saying we're trying to get money to pay for our salaries, it just doesn't make sense. Is Old Town the caving grounds that shut down the west end of Iron Street? So how can an engineer or architect give the okay to build housing there? And so we have ample studies that were conducted prior to the purchase of the area known as Old Town. The city also commissioned environmental site assessment in 2023, which concluded there were no environmental concerns, because it's always, the property in question has always been housing before the houses were taken down. Isn't the area next to a street that has a few newer duplexes, houses on it anyways? Yes, that's why we pursued that, because it's near housing already. One factor again is the proximity to the utility services. Some of these I'm not gonna read because we've already talked about it several times, so to save you the torture here. Okay, is it going to affect the Heritage Trail? No, it will not affect the Heritage Trail. And I think that's all I'm gonna have, but I will submit these for the public record. Mr. Mayor, public is welcome to FOIA these if they'd like. Mr. Mayor, I'll entertain any questions for you or any council members concerning what we've talked about this evening.
Questions, direct them to me and I can, I guess, redirect. Mr. Howard.
Well, we've covered a lot of stuff here, and it seems like for the last 45 minutes, we've been shooting a dead horse. I know there was a big deal to capture taxes when Jackson Grove was sold, and it's now supposedly called the SNAP project, or whatever the heck it is. And under my understanding is, 18 months after that property was sold, the city could have taken it back and not had any more added expenses. That was an agreement made with the contractor, right?
But is this within?
This, we're getting there, Dave, it takes time.
I know, but we're talking about a specific area to be rezoned, we're not talking about Mr. Snap's area, so please.
Well, what I'm getting at here, Dave, is I think we've been misled a little bit here about the sewer that had to be put in, and, maybe there's been some misdirection by the city manager's part.
Well, it's, okay, your comment will be noted, thank you, Mr. Howard.
So I don't get to finish?
And anyone else, your comment will be noted, thank you. And you start getting specific toward the city manager and all this and different properties and all, that was, anyone else like that comment? Okay, I guess, myself, it's like, thank you for everyone for your comments and your concerns about the area. Understood and we heard. It's, years ago, I went to a conference and, there's a gentleman on stage. He says, let me give you a definition of politics. You're not gonna find it in a dictionary. So definition of politics is one person on one side of town wants a ditch dug in front of his house for water to drain off. Then there's another person on the other side of town, doesn't care about his ditch, he wants a tree or two taken down. So, now you have to find a happy medium in between. So, I guess that's kind of where we're here, is where's the happy medium, and what would be the best benefit for all citizens of Negaunee. And, like I said, we've heard your concerns. But decision is now, what do we do with it? And as the presentation said, it's not like there's bulldozers waiting outside ready to take care of the property. And I know I'm being, I'm not being facetious in that, but it is a lengthy process. And it's not just something that can happen right away. And there's gonna be public comment, public opinion, public input, that's what I was trying to say, and about what they want there, and those considerations would be taken into consideration, because I've been to enough planning commission meetings and such, that yes, the public is heard. So, I guess on that, that's my comment. So I guess, okay, so I get a motion on,
I make a motion that we leave it alone. We don't do nothing with it, we leave it as recreational area, it's owned by the city, and we leave it that way.
Point of order, we don't need a motion to not do anything. There's no need for a motion to not take action.
That's correct. Typically, we don't make motions to not do something.
So
It could fall for a lack of a motion.
sure. But in order to get to the point where we can have discussion about it,
Correct. To
All
have
right,
discussion,
then
you need a motion.
I'll make the motion that we approve the ordinance amendment 156 as presented to us in the packet.
second,
I'll second that.
Mr. Smith. Okay, discussion, Mr. Becker?
Sure. I think I agree with the mayor. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate your turning out tonight and sharing your interests and your concerns. I hope you'll continue to do that on all kinds of issues. I think that hopefully, in order to provide maybe some more context to the situation, the map and the visuals I think are really helpful. The city of Negaunee is 9,366 acres total. 3,400 of those acres belong to Cliffs. So more than a third of the property in the city is owned by Cliffs. 1,442 acres are either public access, natural resource, recreation, or the cemetery. There's another 482 acres, that's Teal Lake, which I think we all acknowledge is basically recreation. So those two things combined, that's 20% of the property within the city. 20% of the acreage within the city is held for the public for recreational purposes. The city owns roughly 900 acres. Okay, the vast majority of which, as Mr. Nelson pointed out, can't be redeveloped readily, easily, affordably. The city has identified these 5 acres, but only about a total of 50 acres that the city actually owns that would be possible for potential redevelopment. And other than these 5 acres, the other 45 of those 50, the vast majority, again, would not be economical for a developer to develop. So as.
Mr. Beck, remember you're addressing
I am.
the chair.
Yeah, yeah. 500, so as somebody pointed out, 5 of those 320 acres is roughly 1.5% of the Old Town Park. 5 acres out of the 1,924 acres that are reserved for recreation in